What's your greatest fear and how do you overcome it? 11th Hour starts now. All of us struggle with fear in some sort of way. Some of us struggle with fear so much that it becomes a psychological phenomenon called a phobia. And then some of us, what we do is we just try to avoid our fears and never confront them or face them and act as if they're not even there. Well, let's take a look at what some of these college students have to say about the question, what their biggest fear is and what they do to overcome it.
I talk about this often with my friends. My deepest fear is actually death.
My deepest fear is not being adequate enough.
My deepest fear is failing, like not achieving my dreams, not getting where I want to be, not being enough.
So I have a very irrational fear of belly buttons, but that's kind of like a stupid thing.
I don't know that I have a deepest fear.
To overcome it, I plan ahead and I always put 100% forward and never settle down for less.
So belly button phobia, again, not really sure what it's called. There is a name for it. You can Google it or whatever. It's totally irrational. No clue where it came from, but it factors into everything I do in life. I don't wear my seatbelt because it goes across my stomach. If I do wear it, I wear it illegally, kind of behind me and just across the top. Again, I know it's irrational, but I can't do anything about it.
I'm scared that one day that I'm no longer going to be here and that all of what I'm going to do is going to impact the world somehow, and I have to live with that. And that's sort of how I come past it. Like I know that when it's my time to come, I know that I'm going to have done what I needed to do to impact the world.
I do not stay up late at night thinking of, some kind of concern or worry. And this is because, as I've been told in the scriptures, and with my relationship with God, I cast all my fears on Him.
Welcome to The Response, where Kathleen and I are going to respond to some of the answers that you just heard. Let's take a look at our first answer.
My deepest fear is failing, like not achieving my dreams, not getting where I want to be, not being enough.
I think a lot of people can really relate to that. I think people feel like they can just not be enough. And that's the biggest thing, is that what if I have all these great dreams and I have all these aspirations and I get to that point and I don't have enough?
You put so much effort into it, you put so much time and money, and all of a sudden everything falls apart.
Oh my gosh.
But on the
scary.
flip side, I know that growing up for me, I actually was afraid to succeed, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I was afraid that once I got there, then what? And so it's kind of the opposite. But a lot of people struggle with fear of failure and even fear of success.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at our next answer.
So belly button phobia, again, not really sure what it's called. There is a name for it. You can Google it or whatever. It's totally irrational. No clue where it came from, but it factors into everything I do in life. I don't wear my seatbelt because it goes across my stomach. If I do wear it, I wear it illegally, kind of behind me and just across the top. Again, I know it's irrational, but I can't do anything about it.
Well, I think that's interesting because he keeps saying, well, I know it's irrational, but there's nothing I can do about it. Well, that's what a phobia is. A phobia is a fear of something that's irrational. Like, for example, when he says belly button phobia, he's talking about feeling pressure against his belly button, so he can't wear his seatbelt
Or like
on
it
a certain
feels
way.
constrained or something with his belly
Something
button.
when he was younger, he learned that that was something to fear.
And I think what's interesting is we can pick up on fears and phobias based on what we are, taught as a kid. And I've had that with many different things, where people would be like, why? I mean, I used to be afraid of going on elevators because I was
Wow.
afraid they would just stop there and I'd be stuck. And so in some ways, I would think that's not quite irrational because it could happen. And I think people who have fears don't think their fears are really irrational like he does. They really think that could happen.
Yeah,
You know,
of course
this is
I'm afraid
not-
of elevators.
like
Isn't everybody?
Everyone should be,
Yeah.
shouldn't they? But fortunately, not everyone is, or else no one would even create elevators. But
Well, if you're struggling with a phobia is where your fear is irrational and it's out of control. And we're going to talk more about it later, but let's go ahead and take a look at our next answer.
I talk about this often with my friends. My deepest fear is actually death.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. I've even struggled with that myself before.
Honestly, it's something that I still struggle with. And I think part of it is because it's the unknown.
Yeah.
It's like I've never done it. So how is it going to be? What will happen? What if I didn't get to say what I wanted to say to who I wanted to say it to? I mean, there's so many aspects about it. It's like going
What if
on
I can do everything I got a chance to do?
yeah, or going on a roller coaster and not knowing what it's like. It's the fear of the unknown, something you've never done. If you've never done it, you don't know what it's like. People can say, oh, it was wonderful. But based on the stories we've heard from people who have actually died and come back, some come back saying it was amazing and some had a different story. So that adds another element to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people can really struggle with that because they don't know what it's like. But what's good in the faith of Jesus Christ is you can know a lot more. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next sections and see what we have more to learn about how to overcome our fears. Oh, yes. Are you coming to me for advice on fear? I have lots to say about this. You see, I was ready for your question before you even came. Let me tell you a parable. Once there was a young man, and when he was a boy, he learned to put on some lenses that helped him to see life in a particular way. And everywhere he went, he saw things through those lenses. And he perceived the world through those lenses. Now, you must understand, fears are often lenses that we learn to put on when we are young children. We are not born with fear. Fear is something that we learn to pick up. And when you pick it up, how do you overcome it? How can you, when you see something and it makes you feel afraid and you begin to perceive that there is danger? It's so simple. You must learn to take those lenses off. And then you can look around and see reality and see maybe that thing that caused you to fear is actually something that's very small. It depends on you, on what type of lenses that you want to live with, my friend. You must find a way to get a new perspective in life. Yes. Okay. Have a nice day.
Real live radio show where people with real problems find answers in a real God.
So I became even more depressed. I decided that it was maybe better off for me to be dead. 2 days before the month was over, I was laying in my bed. I was awake, and all of a sudden, my room filled up with this light, and there was no doubt that the person that was visiting me that night was God.
13 years old, I started selling drugs. I started living that type of life. That lifestyle became like my mother and father. So I stole in order to go to juvenile detention so I could have a place to sleep.
Join us for the Real Life Radio Show, where people with real problems found answers in a real God. We're on 94.7 FM The Word nightly, Monday through Friday at 9:45 p.m. I can remember when I was a little girl and I would do anything. I would ride roller coasters, I would walk outside barefoot, I would play with crawfish. I was so wild and adventurous. Fear was never part of my life. But then something interesting happened to me. Reality came in with the news and with people's conversations, and I started to listen to these adults and all these scary things that they went through. And as they talked about those things, they became part of my life. And I started to become afraid of them, afraid to fly, afraid to go on rides. Everything started to box me in, and little by little, the life was sucked out of me. Have you ever had that experience where you weren't afraid of something, but then all of a sudden you were? Maybe it was because someone told you a story and you thought, oh gosh. And part of it for me is because I wanted to protect myself. I thought if somehow, some way that I would preserve myself, then I wouldn't get hurt. And you know, it's been something that I've had to walk out. And what I've learned is that I need to face my fears. And what I've done is I faced them and I'm overcoming them even now because I've allowed fear to come into my life so much that it's kind of like a bunch of thorns that have covered me up that have to be plucked out one by one. And that's the way I learned how to deal with fear, is to challenge it. And it hasn't been easy. And what I'm learning now is that if you can have a total surrender, like a surrender to God, then the fear won't be there because you trust that He will take care of you. Now, I'm not saying I've arrived there, but that's something that I ask the Lord for as I surrender to Him, to be completely set free, because that's what He wants for me and you. But until then, I challenge those fears and I say I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. God bless you all.
Welcome to Untwisting Science, where we're here to find out what science has to say about the subject at hand. Well, fear. What is it? Why do we have to experience it? Is it always bad? Michelle, what is fear?
Fear is an emotion that people can feel when a person perceives a danger or a threat. Fear can be good and can promote the survival of a species for protection purposes.
Well, you see, fear, it's an emotion. But emotions, they control your body, and that's why you feel uncomfortable when you feel fear. But it is good for you. You see, fear comes from your limbic system deep inside your brain. It's a complex part of your brain made up of many parts working together that give you that feeling of emotion. And that emotion, it's powerful on the rest of your body. There are parts of the limbic system that control the parts of your body that you don't control consciously, meaning like you don't really have control over that part. But fear is an indicator to the rest of your body, let's fight or let's get out of here. And it's uncomfortable because fear will do many things like increase your heart rate. It'll dilate your blood vessels, and it's basically it's running blood through faster. It makes you look tougher on the outside. It increases muscle tension to fight or run. And then that's why your hairs on the back of your neck, they stand up, because that's what's going on. But anyways, you have increased alertness, and you definitely won't be able to fall asleep when you're feeling fear. And another thing is you're going to have dyspepsia. which is another term for indigestion, or your stomach just stops working. It takes a break. It lets it so that instead of digesting and taking food when you're at rest, you are ready to move, and all the blood flows away from your stomach and it flows to your muscles. So remember, fear is an emotion. It isn't actually reality. It's an emotion that someone feels when seeing something that they perceive as a danger. The problem is when things that are not necessarily threats, we can become paralyzed or frozen in fear. So why do we perceive threats differently? Michelle?
Fear is a learned behavior. John B. Watson did an experiment in 1920 to understand fear more with a child who had an irrational fear to dogs. In this study, an 11-month-old boy was taught or conditioned to fear a white rat in a laboratory. The fear became generalized to include other white furry objects, such as bunnies, dogs, and even balls of cotton.
Well, that's something that we're learning here. Fear is something that's taught and learned. It is something that we're conditioned with through our environment. So some fear is natural and good, but oftentimes we learn to fear from what other people fear. In a study, they proposed that people learn to fear regardless of whether or not they experience trauma themselves. They can actually inherit fear by observing it in others. So take a moment to think, what are you afraid of? And is that fear possibly learned from someone else when you were a child? I mean, fear can be a good thing, but when it hinders us from being free and to experiencing other things, it can be quite a nuisance. Michelle, what are the top fears that people report having these days?
In a 2005 Gallup poll, a national sample of young people from the ages of 13 through 17 were asked what they feared the most. Their top 10 answers in order were terrorist attacks, spiders, death, failure, war, criminal or gang violence, being alone, the future, and nuclear war.
Wow. Thanks, Michelle. That is good to know that some people fear spiders more than they fear death. But it shows you that sometimes fears can be quite irrational. And when they are, they're called phobias. You see, these fears can be quite a pain. I mean, walking around afraid of terrorist attacks, death, failure, being alone. These fears can prevent us from living a happy, fulfilled life. So the question is not, how can we not fear? How can we overcome the fears? That is the question. So Michelle, how do we overcome fear?
Sir, that I do not know, but what I can tell you about fear is that fear is an emotion that comes from the limbic system in the brain. The limbic system is the seat of our emotions and is the same place where we can experience fear, anger, anxiety, horror, but can also experience joy and happiness from the same center.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, you don't ever see a scared, happy person kind of like, you don't ever see that. And why? Because it's that part of the brain can only do one thing at the same time. It's either one or the other. Otherwise, you'd see things like what you just saw. So knowing this can help us overcome, because you can't be happy and have fear at the same time. Emotions control your body, but can you control your emotions? If you find out how to activate the joy and the happy parts of your brain, then you may be able to override the fear response and retrain your brain. But how do we replace that fear with? I mean, basically, to find out, we need to turn to a higher power. So until next time, Untwisting Science, over and out.
Did you know that we have an orphanage called Awakening the Nations located in Uganda, Africa? At our orphanage, we have 39 children who we provide for every day. These children are in need of clothing, food, clean water, medical care, and education. Recently, we were able to provide them with mattresses and mosquito nets. In order to continue providing for these children, we need your help. Would you consider donating to our ministry at awakeningthenations.com? We're not only called to share the good news of the gospel, but to help the poor, the needy, and the fatherless. Many of these children have been orphans because their parents were in war and killed. Evangelist Onlay goes every year to visit these children. Please consider bringing hope to the hopeless and linking arms with us to spread the love of God. Your love gift of any amount will be appreciated, and we'll send you a one-time gift for encouraging us, a CD for your donation of $25 or more. Again, please contact us at awakeningthenations.com to make your donation.
Welcome to Bible Rubics, where we are here to discuss what God has to say about the subject at hand. Well, fear. You know, I'm really afraid of heights. And how do you deal with fear? How do you deal when you're in a moment when you're feeling like you're in danger and you're feeling like you don't know what to do or what the next step is? Let's talk about that, because the Bible has a lot to say about fear. So many times fear is thought as a negative thing. And it's true, it feels negative because it's something that grips you and makes it so that you can't even think anymore. It can paralyze you. However, fear is a good thing. Fear is a God-given emotion. And what does the Bible say about fear? Well, what's interesting is that the Bible talks again and again of the concept of not fearing anything else but God alone. We are created to have fear, but to fear God and not fear things that could potentially harm us. Yes, there's a level of fear for that, but it's not something we're supposed to be terrorized of. We're actually beings that are supposed to be filled with faith, filled with courage, filled with strength, the ability to be able to do things, not to be paralyzed by fear. But there is a good fear, and I want to talk about it because Jesus talks about it in the book of Luke chapter 12, verses 4. I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that have no more that they can do. But I will show you of whom you should fear. Fear him who, after he has killed, has power to cast into hell. Yes, I say to you, fear him. So this is an interesting thought, because what really can anything bad do to us? I mean, usually we're afraid of the unknown, or we're afraid of what someone can do to us. But truthfully, we need to be afraid of the one who has much more control, not just over our life, but what happens to us after we die. But it's not like the kind of fear that's supposed to paralyze us or prevent us from having a relationship with God. It's a different kind of fear. Let's read on. It says, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 copper coins? And not one of them is forgotten before God. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear, therefore, for you are of value more than many sparrows. In practicality, when we fear God, we get to a point where we realize that we're only fearing the one who has the power over everything, but he cares for us. So he is the one to fear, because he's the one who loves us and cares us to the point he numbers every hair on our head. I mean, God is obsessed with you. And that's why he's saying, fear not. Don't fear anything. Just fear him. Let him take care of everything else in your life. Well, is this very practical? Yes, I've experienced this in my life. For example, I am normally petrified of heights. You know, when I am in a place that's very high, I normally begin to be paralyzed. I can't talk. I can't really do anything at all. But today I'm able to overcome that fear. I feel the fear, but I'm able to overcome that fear is because I realize in the moment that, wait a minute, I fear God, and all of my other fears, they become tame, or they become to the point where I'm in control of them. See, when we fear God, all of the other fears begin to dissipate because our fear is directed at the right thing or the right person. And so honestly, when I go around in life, I used to be afraid of people, what they thought of me. I used to be afraid of death. I used to be afraid of so much. But now that I've placed my life and everything into God's hands, I'm no longer afraid of anything else. I realize that no matter how I feel or how much fear I feel, God is going to take care of me. So I'm sensing there's someone right now, and you're saying, I am paralyzed by fear, or I want to learn how to overcome my fears. I want to pray for you. But most of all, we have to develop a culture or a heart to fear Him. Do you know Him, my friend? So I want to pray for you. Father God, I'm praying for my friend who's listening right now. And I pray, Lord God, first of all, that you would break the bondage of fear right now in their life, in Jesus' mighty name. But most of all, Father, I pray that we would have a heart to fear you, to realize, oh God, that you're the one in control, and it's not us, and you control our lives. So Father, we give our lives to you. Say that, my friend. God, I give my life to you, and I give my fears to you. And in you alone, God, do I fear, do I respect, do I have reverence for. And I'm not going to fear anything else, knowing that my life is in your hands from this day forth. So God, we surrender our lives to you in Jesus' mighty name. Well, until next time, we'll see you on the next 11th Hour.
We want to thank you for watching the 11th Hour, sponsored by Awakening the Nations. Awakening the Nations Ministry is a non-for-profit ministry reaching people through TV, radio, and events.
Our goal is to reach people across the U.S. and the nations with the powerful, life-changing gospel message. Right now, we're doing that through our Real Life Radio show, which is on 16 stations here in the U.S. and in Canada. Our hope is to go across this country and, of course, abroad. We're also on this TV show reaching people now, but we need to expand, and that's our desire, and we can't do it without you. Thank you so much for your support.
For your donation of $25 or more, Ann and Kathleen would like to send you their new book, Evidence, where they feature people who did not believe in God, but had an encounter that changed their lives. These stories will encourage your faith and bring hope to your situation. If you call now, they will also send you their 4-CD variety pack from their Real Life Radio show. On the CDs, you will hear life-changing stories from people who were raised from the dead, free from addiction, those who struggle with their sexual identity, and women who are victims of sex trafficking but escape. Call now to make your donation at 877-480-4477. That's 877-480-4477. Or you can make a donation online at awakeningthenations.com and click the donate button, and in the message box type the number 11.
Thank you again so much for your support, and together we will be awakening the nations.